The Times reveals this morning that £25 billion in Russian assets in this country will be unlocked to support Ukraine. We can speak to Luca Lery Moffat, who is from the Kyiv Independent, is an economics reporter there and a former research analyst at Bruegel, the economics think tank. Morning to you, Luca.
Morning.
So just explain to us, this is not about interest on frozen Russian assets. This is actually spending the assets themselves.
Yeah, so previous initiatives to use the assets have only been using the interest generated on the underlying assets. That was used by the European Union, about 3 billion euros a year for their contributions to an initiative to support Kyiv. Whereas now a new legal mechanism will be used in order to use the entire value of the assets, as you say.
So talk to us about that new legal mechanism, because we've spoken about this for many, many months on this programme, with people coming on saying that this should be used in full. The frozen Russian assets should be used in full. And the counter argument has always been we could be legally challenged down the track. So what's changed?
Sure. Well, I think what's changed is that the realization in 2025 came that the war was not going to end, that US support had ceased, and that the US was washing its hands of Ukraine's fate. And that meant that and also the realization that there was a $65 billion budget gap in Ukraine forecasted for 2026 to 2029. And I think that really sort of spurred the political will to look for innovative ways to use these assets.
I'm going to ask a really basic question now, so don't laugh. But when we talk about frozen Russian assets, is it just money in bank accounts that we've seized?
Sure. Well, so it hasn't been seized yet. All central banks hold foreign reserves, and it's a practice which dates back to the 19th century, when private banks used to be central banks used to be private institutions, and these take the form of bonds. They can be gold, they can be cash. In the case of the Russian assets, I can talk about the assets that they were holding in Belgium. So the UK holds 26 billion euros, 25 billion pounds, as you said. The vast majority of the approximately $300 billion of Russian assets, which were frozen in 2022 after Russia's full-scale invasion, were held in Belgium, about 185 billion euros worth. And these were held at an institution called Euroclear, and most of these were short-term bonds. So about two-year bonds, and held in euros, held in dollars, held in other currencies. Euroclear being a central securities depository. It's not a bank, it's a sort of financial cog in the system which facilitates transfers. So when they were frozen, these were held as bonds. Most of them in Belgium were held as these short-term bonds. And as time went on, these bonds gradually matured. And when a bond matures, it turns into cash. You get the principal, the amount you paid in, plus the interest. And when this turned into cash, it essentially became, as you said, cash in a bank account. And the Euroclear moved this cash to a bank account at the ECB, like you and me do. They put it in a bank account. It pays a very meager interest rate because it's not being invested in any sort of innovative way. It's just being parked in a bank account, and the banks pay the lowest interest rate they can on it, or the overnight rate, as we say. This is a sort of feature of Euroclear's business model, was that, well, essentially that interest that was being paid on that cash doesn't actually belong to the Russian central bank. It belonged to Euroclear. And that's why the Europeans were able to use this interest in order to help Ukraine.
Really interesting. So we're talking about £25 billion in the UK of Russian money, which could be or will be used. 250 billion across all of these G7 and Western allies who are also going to use it. I mean, I'm imagining 250 billion pounds of money going to Ukraine to support the war effort will have a huge impact.
Definitely. Well, there was still we don't know how this money is going to be used. There was no political agreement on that yet. Friedrich Merz, in his recent op-ed in the Financial Times, said that the cash should only go to military for military purposes, for weapons, so that Ukraine could defend itself. The Ukrainians would like to see a more sort of diverse use of the cash. There's also the question of reconstruction. This money can only be spent once. If you spend it all on weapons now, maybe a couple of years down the road, there won't be as much money for reconstruction. Now, of course, there will never be reconstruction if Ukraine doesn't have weapons to defend itself. But this is still something to be ironed out. But I think what it shows is that the political will is there, and that the Europeans are really willing to support Ukraine into the long run.
And presumably that's going to be a huge boost to President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people who, you know, quite understandably, they're war weary. This has been going on for so long, and it has been such a struggle, not least for President Zelensky trying to get support from, for example, Donald Trump.
Definitely, there's, you know, if you speak to many Ukrainians in Kyiv, then they will not really understand why it's taken so long for this money to be used for Ukraine, especially given the end of US support and the increasingly the budget gap forecasted for 2026 is 2029. However, and the reason that it took so long being that this is a very sensitive issue. Central bank reserves are uniquely protected under international law. However, now, given as I said, the end of US support, the budget gap, I think the political will has arrived to find innovative ways of using this cash.
Finally and briefly, someone's just messaged this in, Stephen, great question. Could Russia use frozen European assets to do the same for their war effort? Have they seized them in Russia, do you know? And if you don't know, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't know. I suspect, this is pure speculation, that, you know, assets, well, central banks hold assets in foreign institutions across the world. And it's normally an apolitical practice. So perhaps there are some small assets being held in Russia, but often you want to hold euros and dollars. And so I'm not sure if the Russian central bank or Russian financial institutions would have been the best place to hold those.
Luca, been absolutely fascinating to speak to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, thank you.
Take care. That's Luca Lery Moffat from the Kyiv Independent. He's an economics reporter, former research analyst at Bruegel, the economics think tank. Absolutely fascinating to get the breakdown of that. So you can read more on that in the Times today. This decision, ministers are preparing to use billions of pounds worth of Russian assets frozen in Britain to support Ukraine, £25 billion. And overall, with the deal with other partners, other Western partners, it would free up £250 billion.